Gaylord Gill. Gaylord is going to introduce his bar mill's one kit build. He's going to point out the differences between laser cut kits, show example of kit bashes he's done, talk about how to search for ideas for this structure. I'm really excited about this build because it's awfully close to a total scratch build product. So Gaylord, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim. Also going to introduce Randy Bosscher as my partner on this project, and he'll be kicking in a little bit later in the presentation. We came up a lot earlier tonight than I expected. I hope you don't expect me to fill the rest of the 2 hours, but we'll.
No, you got 15 minutes, Gaylord.
That's what we planned. So we are going to talk about tonight it's the introduction of the project, and we will we've titled it Working with the One Kit. So I believe we are the third build along after the Conowingo and the Blair Line projects. This is a structure kit that is by Bar Mills Modeling, and you see the names of Randy and me. We are the facilitators for this project. Well, we think it's a really neat kit because it is offered in 4 scales, and we'll hope to get a nice participation in this from a lot of different folks in different scales. I mentioned last week, this is a very unusual structure kit because there is no picture on the box of what it's going to look like when it's built. And the reason is each modeler will create his or her own design. You will, if you're going to participate with us, one of your jobs will be to figure out exactly what you'd like to build. Usually with a kit build, you order your kit and you receive your kit and you probably jump in and start building. But we have a couple of extra steps that are to be required on this particular kit. And one of them is to figure out what you want to make. There are a lot of possibilities. We will, during the course of the next few minutes, we'll show you what the kit contents are. We will also mention what is not included in the kit, because I think it's important to know that. But you're going to have to decide how you want to use these materials. And we strongly recommend that you draw up your plans. Again, the walls of the kit are not pre-cut. And so there's going to be some decision making on how you want to use the materials. And to do that effectively, you really should draw up some plans. Doesn't have to be architectural drawings, but something that shows what you thought through and dimensioned parts, dimensioned components so that you know where you're headed. And along the way, you will have to identify some additional parts and materials, and we'll explain what those are likely to be. And then you will be able to begin your construction. So next, we're going to talk about the kit contents, and I'm going to ask Randy to do the voiceover on this section.
Evening all. Okay, the first page we have here, I'll draw you down to the lower right corner. This is one of those 2 versions is what you get in the kit. As you see on the left side, there's 4 pieces. In the S scale kit anyway, they measure 24 by 40 scale feet. We assume that the others are similar. We don't know that for fact. The reason there's 2 pictures in the lower right, by the way, is that we also don't know for sure which form of milled clapboard siding you get. We and our compatriots have S scale kits that are encompass both. Some kits have one, some we'll see. Going back over to the lower left there, you can see the scoring lines. Those are laser scores, not cuts. They are modular in nature. Each of those little blocks are 32 inches wide, scale inches. What's maybe not so apparent is that the space between them is also 32 scale inches. So this facilitates the ability to really make a lot of different arrangements of windows and doors. The appearance is that you can only put windows where you see the score lines, but we'll show you later that you do not. So just from a planning standpoint, be aware that you can move the windows in 32-inch increments. So the next slide, we see you get a fairly generous bunch of laser cut sheets of doors and windows. This is cut in 1/32 plywood, as you see. They are, of course, cut to fit the openings that you saw in the previous slide. There are several varieties of doors. I think these kits tend to lend themselves more towards commercial structures rather than residential type structures. But there's at least 3, maybe 4 different kinds of personnel doors. On the right-hand picture, if you look at the left side of the right-hand picture, you'll see some of the window cuts that they've done. You see them there in the form of a 10-light window. You can make a lot of different modifications to that. You can cut them down to be like a 6-light, 4-light, 3-light, etc., or 2-light. So that's one way of modifying. You can make them into a double hung form. You can put 2 of them side by side. You can also, of course, you could remove muntins if you wanted a slightly more modern look, with larger panes of glass. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility built into these things. Even the door trim is cut in an inverted U shape, which you can then trim. If you've shortened windows, for example, you can shorten them accordingly. And the sill piece is cut separately. So you just put the sill on wherever you need it to be. So. You also get a little bit of strip wood, not a whole bunch. These are all square cross section. You can see 2 different sizes. The larger size is for bracing, and they will probably use up about half of that to make interior corner connections. And then the smaller ones form the trim boards for the corners. And just get a few other little miscellaneous pieces here. Of course, you get some acetate for window glazing, black and white signage. Those of you who are familiar enough with working in the like Photoshop type or editing programs, you could certainly scan these. You could change the colors, you could reverse them. These are all, as you'll notice, white on black, which tends to favor pre-war applications. And I assume everybody here is old enough to know which war I'm talking about here. After the war, they tended to go more towards dark lettering on light. You also get an instruction booklet. Don't get too excited about that. There's not a lot of instruction in there. The first half roughly covers what you need to know in terms of modifying the windows and doors and how to assemble them and so forth, which of course will be covered in the build series. The last half of it has a series of pictures with write-ups of things that people have done with the kit. Take a look at it. One thing that's a little bit weird about this is I'm perfectly aware that there are plenty of people out there watching that are probably better at this than I am, but our target market is not you. Our target market here is people that are not familiar with scratch building. This is a way to just sort of ease it in. That's the point of the closer to scratch building. I noticed in the chat, somebody mentioned earlier that it should be called a bundle. And that makes sense because it really is a scratch build. If you were to build something and enter it into a contest, you don't have to call this a kit because it's pretty much scratch building. As far as tools, some of the other build sequences of discussed tools, nothing here is really special or amazing. Pretty much ordinary modeling tools are going to be able to cover your needs. When we get into the builds, you may see some tools that are particular habits of Gaylord or myself, but none of those are necessary, just ordinary tools. The wall assembly being old school, basically what we're just saying here is there's no like little nice tabs and slots and all that kind of stuff to do the thinking for you. You get to glue them together old school. I think we already kind of covered the windows and doors pretty well. The fact that we can modify and move those things around. So on the last point, you will need to add materials. There is nothing in terms of foundation materials or roofing materials. When you think about it, the point of the whole thing is that you can make something out of a universal kit. So obviously they can't really give you a foundation or a roof. Details that you're going to want to add, you know, like Gaylord's got here, chimneys, entry steps, loading docks, people, things that give it life, all kinds of little stuff. And you will not get a picture of the finished model, as Gaylord mentioned earlier. So what do you want to make?
Well, to give you some ideas, thanks, Randy. I'm going to share one project that I built last year that I used the one kit for as a starting point and added more materials to it. It's a bar and grill. This particular photo is of a grill in Buffalo, New York. It happens to be the region that I'm modeling on my layout, so it was very appropriate. We have both a relatively current view on the left, and also there was I found on the internet a vintage view from probably the 1920s. And I particularly like some of the features, like the horizontal trim between floors, the shingles on the third floor, this clipped roof on the front. It's kind of different. And so I looked at the one kit and I said, maybe this will be a good starting point. And here is the kit that I built in S scale. Now, the sides are from the kit, these milled wood sides. The window frames also came from the kit. You might note, Randy pointed out that the way the windows come, they are 10 lights. I have a set, effectively what would be an 8 light. Excuse me, honey. Susan. Sorry. And I cut out some of the mountains in between to create larger upper and lower part of the window sash. All of the front here is scratch built. So this is clearly not part of what came in the kit. I used various strip wood. I used actually some milled molding that is typically used for doll houses to do some of the horizontal trim. I found some HO shingles that were in a diamond pattern that I used up here. All of the roof is scratch built, basically made from mat board. Chimneys scratch built. There's a well around this side street actually rises about 5 degrees, and so I notched the bottom of the siding and have visible cement block foundation underneath, and then a well around the side door. So that was my application of a one kit. And Randy's now going to share a kit bash where he started with a kit and took the result way beyond what the original manufacturer intended.
Gaylord, if you could bring that slide back just for a moment. So I wanted to use a couple of features of this to sort of set up the next one. You know, when I spend time coaching somebody on scenery, I have this little mantra about textures and layers. You know, basically, if you think about those long enough, you'll find that that's your answer, your core to developing any kind of scenery. And it also works on buildings to some degree. Now, on Gaylord's building here, you know, the front wall has a lot of texture. It has a lot of things going on here. It's architecturally interesting. The side wall, well, I should point out too that you know, my build that you're going to see is a fantasy build. This is a prototype build that Gaylord's done. So fidelity to the prototype is informed probably about 90% at least of what he's done here. So the sidewall, as on the prototype, you know, the original carpenters, they didn't give quite so much love to the sidewall. And I will point out that in Gaylord's layout, when you roll up on this scene, that is the wall that you're first going to see. That's the one facing the aisle. So what's been done here by Gaylord, you look at the little things that are added to this that bring the, I'll call it authenticity to this thing, and therefore some interest. You know, when you look at this, you feel comfortable that this is what the real building looked like. Little things like the electrical boxes, gutters and downspouts. I love that the chimney has flashing at the base of it, as does the stack vent behind it. The wind braces on the chimney. These things all pump it up. One thing I don't think I've ever seen but one time modeled is the stairwell that Gaylord did. And in fact, the one time that I have seen it modeled is on another building of Gaylord's, which is right across the street from this one. So basically, I guess I just want you to note these things, because when you get to planning out something for this one kit approach, you know, you don't need to jump into making the building itself real fancy, but what you do need to think about is how am I going to make this appealing? How am I going to make it look like something other than a model box? So moving on to the next one here. This is a photo of off of the Motrack Models website. A couple of things I want to bring your attention to here. One is that you've probably seen about enough of what's in the one kit that you might guess that you could pretty much build this building or something very similar to this building using the one kit. And I think this isn't a real fancy building. The roof is about as simple as you're going to possibly get. Foundation is just a rectangular thing. It's not very complicated. You could even put this thing down at ground level, you know, forget a loading dock type approach, put it down at ground level, more like, say, auto repair or something where you might have to drive inside. So the other thing, well, here's another point too. Let's make some number comparisons here. I can only speak S scale numbers. So HO guys subtract, O scale guys add. The one kit that we're dealing with is, I think, right around $38 with the deal that Art Fahey is offering. So you need a few extra things. So let's say it might cost you as much as $50. This Motrack kit, which you could mostly duplicate, is $100. So you've already saved 50% by building it out of the kit. Now, once you get more familiar with scratch building, you know, let's go back a step further and say, well, we're just going to buy some materials and build this whole thing just out of raw materials. In that case, you're probably talking, no more than $25 worth of materials. And now we're down to a 75, maybe 80% savings. You know, that's pretty good. You know, if an 80% savings doesn't get your attention, then you're probably not a model railroader. So we're going to have to virtually kick your virtual backside out of the virtual room if you're not really a modeler. So slide on to the next one, I believe. From this kit, by the way, the Motrack kit, that's what was handed to me to build this building. And I see the chat there. Yes, there is a discount code. It'll be at the end of the presentation. So the answer is yes. So this was built for the Southeast Michigan S-gauge traveling layout. Needed to fit a specific space, and by fit I mean both fit within, but also maximize it. You know, we needed some volume to fill the space. Now, from the previous thing, you'll note two identifiable walls. The nearest one, the trapezoidal one, came through the process pretty much intact. The one behind the loading dock, you know, with all the freight doors, there's slight modifications, but again, pretty much intact. Those are the only two walls that survived. The rest of it, I don't remember if this was donated to us or if the club bought it, but I know it wasn't my money, so I cheerfully chopped it up into little pieces. The result of that is that the footprint of this building is roughly 4 times what the footprint was of the original kit. But here's the interesting point. The actual bits and pieces of stuff that I took out of my personal stock to expand this building probably don't amount to much more than $15, $20 at the most. So we've really gained a lot of activity and a lot of space, a lot of volume for very little extra money. Now, going back to my texture and layers thing, when I haven't looked at this building for a while, and I looked at something like this picture, my eye goes pretty much immediately to the big green roof, you know, and the window area underneath it. But then here's what we're trying to accomplish in a build like this, is to draw your eye around, you know, keep your thought process busy. So from the red roof, or the green roof rather, you might drift up to the cupola on the top. There's another cupola on the side there with the rusty roof. Both of those are sided board on board. Oh, what's over there on the right? We got a little brick boiler room down there. In the original piece that we talked about. You slide over to the dock area which trying to tell a little story of stuff going on there. And I kind of like the light dark thing that goes on there too with that shield. Yeah. But basically, the reason I'm talking about this one is to get you accustomed to the idea that you can make what do I want to say? You can make a construct that is very interesting to the eye, but it doesn't take a lot of effort. You know, the actual building of it, yeah, it takes effort, but the planning, not so much. I'll just mention that this particular one, this was deemed worthy of a blue ribbon at a national convention. So the reason I mention that is the next question is why? What makes this appealing to judges? Judges are people, they tell me, at least allegedly they are. So I think the first answer to that is a lot of that activity that we talked about. You know, there's sort of juxtaposed walls, a lot of different types of wall materials. The roofing, there are 6 roofs on here and 4 kinds of material. Same with the walls. There's, I think, 4 types of wall structures on here. Also, you can see a little bit of how we expanded from that original box to this much larger box by mixing different materials. Another little piece of advice that was given to me a long time ago, and I sometimes have a hard time following it, but the advice is relevant to both this structure and the one that Gaylord just showed, in the fact that I was told, don't model things that you can't see. And that's good advice. The back of this building sits less than a half an inch away from the backdrop. So guess what? There's no back on the build. Well, there's a back, but I mean, it's just mat board basically. Same thing with Gaylord's. If you could see the back 2 walls, they butt up against other buildings and neither of them is a finished wall. So
Great, Randy.
I'm sorry.
I think that's great. Let's move on.
Okay.
I think we're running a little bit over on our. You want to just mention the?
Sure. Yeah, I'm good at running over. Yeah, these are just a couple of ideas. The book contains these. The one in the upper right, I think, really is a very good visual treatise on what you can do and how the different windows assemblies and so forth can be put together. The other two are examples of builds that people have done. Again, fairly simple, not real complicated. For those who are using this as a way to dip your toe in the scratch build water, don't want to get too excited about, diving into the real tough stuff. Do something like this, do your research, get some ideas, get a rough plan together.
All right, I'm going to spend thank you, Randy. That's great. I'm going to spend just a minute or two talking about how you might do some research, because unless you've already got a plan in mind for a structure, you might want to do some poking around and seeing what you can come up with. So internet is our friend. You will find this is a little bit tougher if you're going after a generic building. It's a little tougher than seeking out photos of a specific railroad structure. If you have very tight keywords for a particular interlocking tower or a particular depot, that's going to be an easier search than just finding a warehouse, for example. But try aliases in your keywords. You might think the term rooming house is equivalent to boarding house, but I bet if you put those two in as different searches, you probably would come back with some different selections. Most of us are modeling earlier eras, so try adding old adjectives like vintage or historic in your search. Look up towns in your modeling region. Very often they will have some historic or photos from that town, and that would clearly aid you in capturing that feel. Try specialty sites. If you've never been out on shorpy.com, that's worth a visit. They've got some wonderful old photos, mostly very high res. Pinterest allows you to also do some keyword searches in their site. And generally, anytime you're doing internet searches, go beyond just the first page or two of the returned links, and you might find some more things that you missed the first time. There's also publications. All of us have railroad books. I happen to find for my use, I'm doing Pennsylvania Railroad Northern Division. They have a book devoted just to facilities within that division. There are retrospective books that show vintage photos. The series by Arcadia is pretty familiar to a lot of us. Magazines like Classic Trains, Vintage Postcards is another source. So let us look a moment at the project timetable for this particular project. We are on the first part of the intro. We're going to do 2 weeks from tonight. We're going to do a part 2 of the intro. We will assume that you have done some looking for the kind of structure you'd like to build. We'll talk about how to create drawings from photos, how to figure out what the additional materials are that you need. We've got quite a bit of downtime between this one and the first of the build. We aren't kicking the build off till April 17th. But once we start the build, it'll be 1 week apart. Each of these is a week apart. And between each of these, we will have assignments for you. So since this is recorded, I won't go over each of these right now, but you'll have this as a reference. So your assignment for next time is figure out what structure you'd like to build. And if you're going to participate with us, order your kit. Here's the website for Bar Mills. As I mentioned, they are offering this in the 4 major scales, N, H, O, S, and O. We have arranged for a 25% off discount, and this is the code that you'll put in when you're doing your checkout. And that code is good through the start of the build program on April 17th. So that is all we have for right now, but if you have questions right for us at the moment, we can maybe field a couple.
Gaylord, if I want a particular siding on the kit that I order, can I order the kit with the siding that I want?
I am not sure. I have tried to find that out from the Bar Mills folks. Any of you are welcome to speak with them directly if you mention your particular scale. Unfortunately, Randy and I just have not reviewed all the other three scales. We're both S scalers, and that's what we know. But as Randy pointed out, we had some kits that we've seen that had one type of siding and some had the other.
Well, I know Art is really supportive of what we're doing. So if any of you have a preference, if you want a specific siding because you know the building that you want to build and so forth with this, I really encourage you to contact the company, not by email, but directly by telephone, and talk to Art. I think he says calling between 12 and 4 Eastern time. But I encourage you to do that because if the kits come in different siding and you want a particular one, I think they'll do everything they can to accommodate you. So thank you so much, Gaylord, Randy. This was a great presentation.
Thanks.
Well, now